2, 3, 4.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Power of Music Thinking. My name is Christoph Zürn, and this is the podcast for people with a musical heart and a wicked job. We're looking for stories, insights and tools from the big world of music to inspire leaders and followers to listen, tune, play and perform in whatever field you're operating. What has political journalism to do with music? Well, quite a lot, it seems. My guest today is Matt Lewis from West Virginia, a political columnist for the Daily Beast, former CNN contributor, TV commentator for MSNBC's morning show, a podcaster on Matt Lewis and the News, pun intended, and a musician. Matt shares with us that he actually started his career, or better, the foundation of his later career, in the basement rehearsing with his band. Years later, when already being a political journalist, he reflected on his music years and wrote an essay about the lessons he learned from playing in bands and how they help him to understand his work in political journalism today. We talk about his musical upbringing, country music, steel and slide guitars, and make many analogies between music and journalism. So here are the 5 lessons from his article that he explains in the show. So 1, having an audience of followers is vital. 2, music like TV commentary involves performing. 3, playing music and being a political commentator isn't nearly as glamorous as people think. And 4, not every song or blog post or column is a hit. 5, collaboration is key. Okay, let's get right into it. Welcome, Matt. Welcome to the Power of Music Thinking.
Well, thank you for having me.
Great to meet you. Matt, let's dive right into the session with my, I always call it the ritual question because I do it every time. So what was your first sonic experience or album or performance that had an impact on you?
Well, according to legend, my dad used to play in a country and western band called Irene and the Country Rascals. And they would play in the 1970s, they would play at a lot of carnivals. And according to my mom, even when I was in her womb, I was playing the bass with my foot along with my dad's bass guitar, as she said in the audience. So that, I guess, would be my first experience. Not really a memory. My first memory would probably be, I was thinking about it just this Christmas. My dad loved, there was a country musician named Charlie Pride who had an album called Christmas in My Hometown. And I still listen to it to this day because, a lot of Christmas music, a lot of Christmas albums are kind of recycled. And he had a lot of original songs that I thought were really good. They blended in kind of the Santa Claus Christmas with the Christ Christmas. And it was very well done. And I just can remember being at like a Christmas party, parents and my aunts and uncles, they're playing cards or board games or something. And I'm sitting on the floor, like listening to that. And it's a feeling of safety and comfort.
Yeah, and also family, everyone together like a community. Yeah. Sounds very good.
Absolutely. And I think kids crave that, but music is a part of it. And I just think for me that and especially even though later on I went on to play in like modern rock bands, I will always have an affinity for country music and those twangy steel guitars that were very popular back in the 70s.
Yeah.
I always have a reverence, a deep abiding respect, I think, for that kind of music.
Nice. Steel guitar. Wow. Great. And so you also play the steel guitar, right?
Well, no, it's funny. I took guitar lessons from a really good teacher named Dale Hooper, who taught me how to, using the electric guitar, do a sort of a faux steel guitar sound. So I can take the steel guitar is basically it's like a table, that you play it sort of like with a slide. But I can come close to making those sounds with a regular guitar. And so if you don't have a steel guitar player, you just have a lead guitar player. If he knows what he's doing, he can simulate those sounds, and that's what I have learned to do. And I used to play in a band called the Backyard Apples, and several of our songs I would incorporate that sound in our music.
Yeah, it's nice, and it's a nice glissando. So it's always the in between. So it's in tune, out of tune, playing with these two moments.
And it's so, and I think it's probably came from Hawaiian music at some point. It came to America. I'm guessing. I'm not an expert on it, but I think it comes from Hawaiian music. But that sound ended up becoming like so iconic and so tied to country music, especially I would say in the 1970s. And it will, if you hear it, it will, for me at least, it takes you back to a time and place.
Yeah, absolutely. What I like is it seems like there are two different tempos, because in country often also can be quick. Like if you have a banjo, there's a lot going on, and the Hawaii guitar is going in a different layer over all these, let's say, all these little sounds. The Hawaii guitar is, covering this.
Yeah,
up.
so I guess the acoustic version is is called a dobro.
Yeah.
A dobro, and then the electric version is a steel guitar. And I like both, but you're right. It's amazing just within, even if you never left kind of folk traditional country music, the range within that type of music is so broad, and there's so like you could devote your whole life to that and never become an expert.
Absolutely. And I like it in that way, because then if you play it on a regular guitar, you just leave the frets where they are. And then it feels a little bit more like a violin as well, because then you have the whole range that that you can tune in and tune out into what you want to do.
It is great stuff, and I still to this day, in my work in journalism, not only do I apply a lot of the lessons that I learned from playing in bands to my journalism today, but I'm sure that you've heard this before, but like I have music on a lot of times, whether maybe it's when I'm brainstorming ideas, or sometimes even when I'm writing, I'll be listening to music. So it is just an incredible part of my life, and I assume almost everybody. And if I meet somebody who just doesn't like music, that I'm a little skeptical of that person usually.
Yeah, that's also interesting to tune into people and to find out if we like the same music or if we can learn from each other, because we have different kinds of music. Matt, will you share with us, who are you? What do you do for a living? And then we cycle back between what you do and the music.
All right. So my name is Matt Lewis, and I live in West Virginia. I'm a political columnist and commentator. I'm center right. So I'm a conservative, but not a Trump fan, but I am a conservative. And I write for an outlet called the Daily Beast, which is a pretty big and important, I would call it, a mainstream outlet. And I am a conservative columnist for the Daily Beast. I also do TV appearances. I used to be a CNN contributor, but now I mostly am doing MSNBC's Morning Joe. I'm on fairly frequently to talk about my writing. And on top of everything else, I also have a podcast called Matt Lewis and the News. And in case you didn't know, that's a reference to Huey Lewis and the News.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice
some
pun.
people are too young. Some people are too young to know the reference.
But they might know some songs.
Oh, yeah. Like The Power of Love.
Yeah,
from
or
the
Stuck
movie
with
Back to the
You.
Future.
Yeah. So I experienced this when you talk with younger people. They're not really interested in, let's say, the old stories about music, but on the other hand, they like the music itself if they hear them for the first time. Say, "Oh, that's nice. Oh, yeah, but that's what I'm talking about." But that's not the point. So it's really they access it directly to the music.
Yeah, I think a common theme with me is blatant nostalgia. And Huey Lewis was huge when I was like 10 years old. And so not only is it, I think, empirically really good music, but it's my music, you know. And so the heart of rock and roll and it's hip to be square and
Yeah,
stuck
that's
with you
one.
and all those songs. And if you've ever seen the movie American Psycho, there's also, that's the other pop culture reference, I think, to Huey Lewis in the News. More disturbing than Back to the Future, but nevertheless important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was big in the 80s, isn't it? Or earlier.
So Huey Lewis's music, I think, definitely peaked in the mid 80s. When did American Psycho come out? I want to say 90s, probably.
And you wrote a column where you share your musical learnings and you relate it to your political journalism things that you're doing today. Can you share with us all these findings, all these parallels or analogies?
Absolutely. So first of all, I think this ties into my nostalgia and sort of search for understanding of who I am and why I am the way I am, which I think is healthy. Joan Didion had some quote about, we're well advised to keep in touch with the people we used to be. Otherwise, they show up at the middle of the night, demanding to know what happened to them. I'm butchering her quote, but it's something to that effect. And so a few years ago, I started doing a lot of kind of just introspection. And one of the things that I always kind of felt bad about, my parents worked really hard. My dad was a prison guard for 30 years in Hagerstown, Maryland. And my parents worked really hard to kind of give me a middle-class life and try to put me through college and all that. And here I was like living in their basement playing in a rock band. And they must have felt, even though my dad had been a very accomplished musician, I think he even kind of felt like, hey, man, the world's tough. My son's a loser. You need to get out there and make something of yourself. And I kind of look back a little bit regrettably about my days playing music, as if I had wasted a lot of time, and I was maybe I would have been better off if I'd like applying myself in journalism classes or in politics. And then it hit me. I had this epiphany where it occurred to me that actually playing in rock bands was an amazing training ground for everything I do today, and that I learned a ton of lessons. And so I wrote a blog post. I used to work at a place called the Daily Caller. And if you're familiar with Tucker Carlson, who's very famous now, he's got his own Fox News show.
Absolutely.
He was my boss. And so I'm at the
Oh,
Daily
wow.
Yeah, I'm at the Daily Beast now, but I wrote this at the Daily Caller. And so I'll give you an example of a few of the things that I wrote about that I learned. The first thing is that having an audience of followers really matters. And so like when I first started playing in a band, I assumed the key was to like hone your craft and become a really good musician and sound great. And then you would record like a demo tape or a demo CD, and that would get you booked at a bar or a club. And then people would hear how great your music was, and word would spread, and you'd become famous, and you'd be on MTV. And later I learned that actually isn't how it works. The key was, first of all, when you go to a bar, you don't say, listen to our demo tape, hear how good we sound. What you say is, we have a mailing list of 500 people, and if you book us Friday night, we'll bring 100 people to drink Bud Lights and, gin and tonics. We'll sell a lot of drinks for you, and we'll pack the bar. And so what I learned is that if you want to make it in music, you have to be very good at public relations and building lists and followers and a fan base. And guess what? That's very similar to journalism nowadays. So that was lesson one. Lesson two,
but maybe one question:
that
what's the order here? So first to be a musician, and then you have a list of all your audience, or first you try to find out how public relations work, and then you start as a musician. Is there any order? Which comes first?
In terms of what I did or what you should do?
Whatever you, however you want to answer that question.
So the way I did it was I tried to become good at music first. And then I realized there was nobody in the crowd. There were no, like, no matter how good we sounded, there was no fans and we couldn't get booked. And so I don't think it's necessarily in terms of the order you do it, but I think in terms of the priority. What I learned is that you have to put a lot higher priority on building a fan base. And that unfortunately, when it comes to being successful, the quality of your music was not as important as the fan base and your ability to mobilize and turn out. And so this is before the internet, but having things like an email newsletter nowadays would be the modern equivalent. We had a postcard that we would send out, and I would work the phones. I would pick up the phone and call 100 friends and be like, "Hey, are you coming out tonight? Are you going to come out and see us tonight?" Begging people to come support the band and building a community. Actually, was a lot of my work was building. I will say, the one great thing is I'm an introvert and I'm very shy, and so having a flyer, like like something to hand somebody was a great way for me to get over my nervousness and meet girls.
Yeah.
And so it did pay off in that regard. But what I learned is I ended up putting in at least half of my time was devoted to the business stuff. If you want to be successful, and I think writing's the same way, and journalism. You could become a great writer. You could write like Hemingway. You could have the best sources. But unless you have a Twitter following or a newsletter or a way to distribute your content, and people who are clicking and retweeting and liking your stories and downloading the podcast, you're not going to be that successful in this business either.
Absolutely. So you can be an introvert, but don't show it.
Yes, I've been hiding it my whole life. But actually, like I said, it's a tool for overcoming your shyness too.
Yeah.
I was able to justify, like, okay, I'm going to go up and talk to these people because it's for my band. It's not for me. I couldn't muster the nerve to go up and talk to them on my own. But I had a reason. Like, we've got a show tomorrow night. I've got a talking point. I've got a flyer, something to hand them, a poster to hand them, and so it was sort of a win-win for me, I think.
Wow, nice. So that was the audience link between the one field and the other field.
Totally. And then the second thing was that both are about performing. Nowadays I have to get up in front of a crowd and give a speech, or I have to get up in front of a TV camera and talk. And back in the old days, I used to have to get up in front of a crowd and play guitar or sing. And overcoming nerves and stage fright is a common denominator. And I think a lot of even developing my voice, I never was a great singer. I never had a great voice, but the process of singing and working on my ear, I think, has helped me as a communicator verbally. But mostly it was just overcoming stage fright and knowing how to rise to the occasion. And the practice I got was playing at bars for people who didn't want to be there, didn't want to hear me, and then overcoming bad things that happen. You might be in the middle of a performance and a fight breaks out, or a fire alarm goes off, or they still got the house music playing while you're trying to perform your music. All of these things could happen if you're giving a speech or if you're on TV as well. And so that really, I think, benefited me and continues to.
It's a great training, and the more training, the better your performance.
Another thing I learned was that it's not as glamorous as you think, Like, we might look at rock bands like Led Zeppelin or The Who and think, or the Beatles. The Beatles are a classic example. Girls screaming, when the Beatles perform or show up in America. In real life, playing in a band for me involved, showing up at like 3:00 in the afternoon. We didn't have roadies, so we had to like load equipment into this beat up van. And because it was a beat up van, then one of us had to like put his foot on the brakes while the other one had to climb under the van, risking life and limb to basically put it in first gear, risking being run over. Then we would arrive at the bar, let's say at 5 p.m. and start unloading. Nobody knows that you're even coming, that you're even supposed to be there. The doors might be locked. Then you play a few, you might play all night. You take a few breaks. As soon as it's over, you can't even sit and talk to people, even if they loved you, even if you have these now fans who want to hang with you. You're like, okay, well, we're going to have a party afterwards, but just wait 45 minutes while I carry all this heavy, load the drums back into the van. Now it's 2 a.m. Everyone else they're having fun. It's not as glamorous as it looks. And I would say actually political journalism is more glamorous than playing in a rock band, believe it or not. And maybe, look, if you're the Beatles, that's a different story. But at my level, there was a lot less carrying heavy equipment. But still in all, it's a job and it's a gig and it's hard work. And you may think you might watch All the President's Men or think you're going to be Woodward and Bernstein or something. In real life, there's a lot of thankless hard work before you get your Pulitzer Prize.
But you're on your way to the Pulitzer Prize in that way. And you're prepared very well, so to hear.
Well, the good thing about journalism is, like music, there's a chance at stardom and a chance at fame, and you do have applause to keep you going. There are fans and applause to keep you going. But unlike music, unlike the rock business, they usually pay you. I mean, if you're a freelance writer, they may not pay you. But I forgot to mention the part about the end of the night when you've played music for hours, when you have to try to get paid by the bar owner who suddenly disappears or wants to charge you for the beer you drank instead of paying you. So because I'm an employee and not a freelance writer, I tend to get paid. And so I think that the journalism business is actually more fun and more monetarily rewarding. You can actually have a life. You can still have a family. And so that's one point for the journalism business. Another thing I learned is just like not every song is going to be a hit. Not every column or blog post is going to be a hit. And getting used to things like rejection and failure, and just keep on moving, continue to progress and get better. You can't have these delusions of grandeur that everything's going to be a hit. There are many times that I write a column, something that I think is decent, and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't. I don't get invited on TV to talk about it. And so that was something else I got used to, was the demoralizing effect of people not caring. I learned that playing music, and it has helped me in journalism. And then the last thing that I learned that I'll talk about is the importance of collaboration. And when you're in a rock band, you're basically married to 4 or 5 dudes usually. And even if you write the song and your name is on it, someone laid down the bass line, probably someone came up with the title. It's a collaboration. And that was one of the most fun things I had, was writing songs and with these other friends of mine, and working together and crafting something beautiful. Like, hey, let's come in with the harmonica here, or that part I loved. And I have that with my writing. Even a book, I'm writing a book now, and I had a book that came out in 2016 called Too Dumb to Fail. And even though it's my name, I have the byline. I had so many people who were involved, editors, people who just helped give me ideas that I quoted in the book or cited in the book, or people that brainstormed with me. It is a collaborative process, and I really love that. So I have to say, I don't think it was wasted time. I don't think I was just a loser in my parents' basement. I think I was honing a craft that eventually paid off in the world of writing.
So actually, the learning here is really to support your kids when they're in the basement, because there will come something out of it, and maybe they will not be a big star, but they will understand what it means to be a star, or it means not to be a star. So I think that's a very, very big learning. Also, that not every song is a hit. When you just made the comparison with the a text you wrote where you think, oh, that's a good one. Now let's get it out, and you just wait so that everybody's coming to you and saying, hey, can I book you for an interview? And it doesn't happen. So is there also a little bit in self-reflection, or because you always have the question, is it me or is it the others? Am I the great artist and the others don't like that kind of music? Or is it the other way around? Oh, I have thought much too much about it and I think I'm good, but actually I don't. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think I've always believed that there should be some combination of integrity with sales. So I would not want to just churn out a column to get clicks or a book just to sell books. At the same time, I do want to sell books and I do want people to read my columns. And the same thing was true with music. I wouldn't want to sell out and just put out, bubblegum pop that just sells records but doesn't have a soul, doesn't have heart. I mean, it's important to me to be putting out work that matters. And so, but for me, it should sell. The free market also decides. And I know there have been brilliant people who were not appreciated during their day, during their time, and were only later appreciated. I don't deign to believe that I'm one of them. That I think that's a very you either have to be legitimately brilliant or a complete narcissist to think that people just don't get it. Everyone just doesn't get it, right? I assume if it's not good, if it doesn't sell eventually, that it was my fault. And so, and I think there is a sweet spot where you can combine work that is smart and meaningful, but also has an audience. And so I strive for that middle ground where I can have my cake and eat it too. But I think there is a time where people might say, look, this isn't for me. And that's what happened with me in music. I still love music. I still play. My kids right now, I have one son who plays piano and is getting pretty good, and another who just started taking drum lessons. And I think he just looks like a drummer. He's just body language for what that's worth. So I'm very interested in music. I listen to music constantly. I still play, but it's not for me as a career. And I just had to accept that at some point. And lucky for me, I found this other career that's also creative, that gives me, it scratches all the itches that I had. And it's also romantic. It's also a chance to achieve a modicum of recognition and or fame and using creativity, but it's more who I am. And I've been able to actually have a family and make a living as a journalist, whereas I could not, even if I made enough money as a working musician, my lifestyle would have been not family conducive, shall we say, and working in bars and casinos and things like that. So I guess my message to parents is there may be, if your kids are doing something, a hobby, or if they have a dream that seems to be a little crazy or unrealistic, it may be that they're learning lessons now that will come in handy later on.
I think that's a very, very nice put together, because it's always not about the parents, because they don't know everything. So it's also trust your kids. I hear a little bit between the lines. Trust them if they find something and they find it interesting. And I think maybe it's also no matter what it is. And because in the power of music thinking, I'm looking for the analogies. So while learning an instrument, learning also that not everything is going from alone. So it's always rehearsing, trying to manage to play something. And that's also an advice that I sometimes give to managers, to start learning an instrument, maybe an instrument that you might not have taken before, and trying to find out that not everything can be delegated, that there's something, and also some joy in learning something, to mastering something, to let's put in the word craft, to really make something out of it. And I think that's something that you can compare with all the other things that you could learn, or you might learn in daily life, that when there's something hard, you can also try hard to manage it. And when you manage it, it's not just over. I think that's the good thing with an instrument, that it just starts, because then you can that part, and then a real world opens into new things. So I think that the learning the instrument, and
Yeah, no, that is well said. And I think that just as you become a better writer with more practice, you become a better musician, better guitar player. But the rehearsal thing, I think, is key. I should have put that one on my list. You've got a big performance coming up, and you work until you can play this thing blindfolded, and you know it like the back of your hand. That skill will be applied to, I've got a book coming out and I have to go do the interview circuit, and I need to be ready to answer this question and that question. I better rehearse. I better really know this stuff, put in the work and the muscle memory. And that's absolutely true. It will teach a work ethic. And also, learning that you can improve is motivational. Seeing yourself improve at something will teach you that you can improve at other things.
Absolutely. Let's say two worlds together: the political world and the music world. And in the pre-talk, we talked about that famous picture from Bill Clinton who was a saxophone player, playing saxophone for Boris Yeltsin. So meaning the American president playing saxophone for the Russian president. Something that in our times at the moment, that's you can't even think about it. Do you know more about that story? And maybe a second question after it. What do you think? What music and political? How can they learn from each other? Or when could we bring in more music into politics?
I mean, for me, the more famous saxophone moment was Bill Clinton playing saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show in 1992. He's running for president, and he comes out playing a saxophone. He's wearing like these sunglasses, looking cool, and I think that really helped him connect with young people at the time. So it was a political tool in a sense to signal that he was cool. But in terms of kind of performing with another political leader, I think that just as we have dinner with someone to bond and connect with them, or you might have a drink with someone, and there's just this innate, if you're having it with someone, everybody talks about like the beer test. We vote for the president you'd want to have a beer with. I'd rather have a beer with George Bush than Al Gore or whatever. I think that playing music is probably even more intimate. I mean, if you are jamming with someone and you're picking up instruments and performing together, that is an even more intimate experience. And so if you can play music with someone and enjoy music with someone, then I think that's bound to unite you with that person to a certain degree. And building relationships are key to everything, including diplomacy.
Absolutely, I like that very much. And even if we get further in the world, it's not only Western musical instruments, but for also instruments that you think, okay, but how do we play? How do we tune? If the Indians have 22 shrutis in one octave and we only have 12, hang on, what do we miss? And this would be interesting to tune in, to tune together, and make something out of it, and maybe also first rehearse and don't do it on stage.
Yes.
Only the two or three together without any advisors, just showing that there is the will to have some resonance with each other, and then the words come in later to make sense for all the other complicated things we hear daily, every day on TV.
I'm sure that another thought I have is, I'm sure that there are people who are great musicians who are, let's say, fascists. But it strikes me that if you're the kind of person who would be jamming with someone and doing improvisational music and collaborating, that's a pluralistic thing. That's an open. That means I'm open-minded. I'm open to different points of view. I'm open to the give and take, and I suspect that would translate to an open-mindedness, if nothing else, a plural. And by the way, I mean I'm like a pluralistic conservative, if that means anything. Our labels these days are really messed up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's very hard to define who is what. The old rules, for one thing, are out the window. But even though I am someone who is on the center right of American politics, I am, like a lot of other people who are where I am, I want to live in a pluralistic society that embraces like liberal values, for example. And it just strikes me that that's very consistent with what you would have with someone who was jamming with someone else, the give and take that comes from playing music with someone and maybe collaborating with them.
Absolutely. And that resonates a lot with me, because I think that's the difference in having a perspective on something or trying to pull someone into your perspective. So I think that's a very good one, because you never know if you look from different perspectives. Sometimes it looks totally different from the other side.
Indeed.
I like that very much. So, Matt, is there anything that we didn't touch between music and politics?
We didn't talk about Richard Nixon, who was pretty good on the piano.
Absolutely.
I think we did a good job. I mean,
Youssou N'Dour, for example. Youssou N'Dour, he was he had that Yeki Yeki hit, and then he was, I think, cultural, or I don't know which kind of minister in the Senegal, I think.
Oh yeah, that reminds me, there was one story I wanted to tell you, which is a few years ago. I had a meeting with I write for the Daily Beast, and we had a meeting in DC. They're based in New York, but we met in Washington, DC. And at some point during the conversation, there were 5 of us there. And one of them was Noah Shackman, who now runs the New Republic. I'm sorry, he now runs Rolling Stone magazine, the famous music magazine. Right. One of them was Michael Tomasky, who now runs the New Republic. I was there, so there were like 5 of us, and of the 5 of us, one of them was John Avlon, who is now at CNN. Of the 5 of us, 4 of the 5 had been very serious musicians, and I'm saying, like, that was our profession. Like, I played, for example, at the Philadelphia Music Conference, which is now defunct, but that was kind of a big deal back in the 90s. That's kind of one of my, on my music resume. John Avlon, I think, had fronted like a punk band or something. And it just struck me as, I do not think it was a coincidence that of the 5 of us meeting, 4 of the 5 of us were not just dabblers or dilettantes, but like very serious musicians. And I suspect that it's a gateway into journalism, that there are a lot of people who begin with maybe delusions of grandeur of being famous musicians, who end up transitioning into journalism. And what I should do is I should have them on someday and ask them, like, did that experience help you with what you're doing now? I think I know the answer, but there's this whole thing about being a failed artist, but I think that there's something to it.
Yeah, you can see it from that part, but it's a very nice story, because I think musicians are natural collaborators, And you can do this on different levels. So you can be an amateur musician, but very dedicated, or you can be a prof musician, but later you switch to something else. But I think you're a natural collaborator, and if this is a natural to you, it's always easy to make something together and to come to something. With words, we would say a consent, or sometimes even a compromise. And in the music world, we would say it's a special song. And I think that's the power of music. And if we put the analogy further, the power of music thinking to work with the natural collaborators.
Totally, I love collaboration. I love working with people, building something, creating something. And I have to say, back when I had my delusions of grandeur, when I wanted to kind of be a rock star, I wanted to be one sort of like Bono, who didn't just, like, I wanted to use that as a platform, the success from our music as a platform to say something important and deeper and even political sometimes, the way that Bono has used his platform, I think, for good. And I get to write about ideas all the time. I mean, I'm not suggesting that something I write dramatically changes the world, but maybe it nudges it a little bit every once in a while. And that's all you can ask for as a writer or as an artist, is to nudge the world, and I'm sure some people have more impact and influence than others, but it's just an honor. Like I said before, my dad was a prison guard for 30 years. So the fact that I get paid to write and to talk about politics, and that someone may listen to something that I said or wrote and it may change their thinking, that's a dream come true.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Matt. Matt, thank you very much for all your insights and stories. And thank you.
This was so much fun. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate this, because listening is one of the top leadership skills, and I feel honored about this. It is my mission to find, create, and share inspirations for meaningful collaboration based on music analogies. If you want to support this, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, or write a review on iTunes or Spotify. And more inspirations can be found on musicthinking.com. We have a blog, and you can download the Music Thinking Framework. And finally, I would love to hear your feedback. And if you need help with a business challenge, please reach out to me via email, podcast@musicthinking.com.